Hello, welcome to today's What's New in MG Research webinar. I'm Jenna Umvalo, and I'll be facilitating today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a couple of items. We want to say a special thank you to today's sponsor, argenx. Thank you so much. Today's session will be recorded and available after the presentation on our website. If you would like to have closed captions throughout the presentation, you can do so by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of the Zoom menu and select English as the language. We encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A box located at the bottom of the Zoom menu bar. Those will be answered throughout the presentation today. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Rosa Jimenez. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction, Jenna. I also want to take this opportunity to thank each of you for taking time to join the webinar today. The title of the presentation is an investigational clinical study for adults with ocular myasthenia gravis. I'm going to be talking about a study that argenx is conducting for patients with ocular myasthenia gravis called ADAPT Oculus. Right up front, I will start by saying that the patient population for this study focuses on patients with pure ocular MG symptoms without any generalized symptoms. And this is irrespective of whether the patients have or do not have the acetylcholine receptor antibodies. We will talk about these a little bit more as we move along the presentation. So I will first give you some information about what a clinical trial or clinical studies are for those in the audience that aren't familiar with them and why clinical studies are conducted. We will talk about the ocular myasthenia gravis patient population, and then I will talk about the ADAPT Oculus trial and give you some information about where to turn to if you are potentially interested in learning more about it. At the end, we will have the opportunity to answer last minute questions, and I'll turn it over to Jenna. But please remember that during the presentation, my colleague, Dr. Oleg Lukash, the trial physician for the ADAPT Oculus study, is online answering your questions live on the chat. I hope that this method works well for everyone. Now I will talk about clinical studies. A clinical study is an experiment basically conducted to learn whether an investigational study drug is effective and safe for treatment of patients with certain diseases. Clinical studies are generally conducted in a very rigorous fashion with very close observation and follow-up periods, as well as with very high standards for how the data is collected and analyzed. Conducting a clinical study requires a cohort of highly specialized and training professionals that include physicians, scientists, statisticians, and trial operations managers, amongst other professionals. So it takes a village to conduct a clinical trial. The key purposes of a clinical study include to ensure that a drug is safe and effective. A clinical study also aims to ensure that throughout the trial, patients are treated well, fairly, and that safety is always prioritized at all times. A clinical study also involves a protocol, which I always see as a type of recipe. A protocol clearly outlines all the different parameters of a study, which include all the different W's, I call them, the what, the who, the when, the where. A protocol clearly describes the overall objectives and endpoints of a trial. The protocol also describes the investigational drug that will be used for a specific disease, how much of the drug might be given or the dose, and the frequency. Also, the clinical protocol states why the actual study is being conducted. Usually, it's to help patients to improve unmet needs with their current treatment. The protocol also delineates who is eligible to participate in the trial. Unfortunately, sometimes patients might not be eligible to participate in the trial, and this could be very frustrating, but this is part of adhering to specific protocol guidances in terms of the inclusion and exclusion criteria. The protocol also describes scheduled visits, which dates the participants would need to come into the clinic for or the administration of the drug, for lab testings and or procedures. These are just examples of the different parameters that might be considered to develop a clinical trial protocol. Clinical studies are, sorry, Jenna, can you go to the previous slide? Yeah. Clinical studies are very important for several reasons. One of them is to evaluate the efficacy and safety of new treatments before they are reviewed by health authorities like the FDA and are made available to the public. They are also used to help expand medical and scientific knowledge by providing evidence that a particular drug is effective. And the data collected from the clinical studies is used as evidence for patients and healthcare providers when they are making or considering and to make a decision in assessing if a particular new treatment is appropriate to use for a particular patient. Thus, the data from a clinical trial should be collected in a way that is objective and of very high quality so that patients and providers can trust the new treatment. Next slide, please. Now I will talk about the investigational drug that will be used in the ADAPT Oculus trial. It is called Efgartigimod alpha, and I will refer to this investigational drug as Efgartigimod for short. The formulation of the of Efgartigimod that will be used in the Oculus trial is in the form of an injection, which is administered via a pre-filled syringe in adults. The injection is under the skin and it lasts about 30 seconds. Then there is about a 30-minute of observation period to ensure that the patient is okay. When efgartigimod enters the body, it works by lowering the levels of in the circulation of a protein that is part of the of our immune system called immunoglobulin G, or IgG for short. And it also lowers the antibody that the body produces against the IgG, and this term is referred to as IgG autoantibodies. The idea with efgartigimod is to lower or remove those IgGs and the autoantibodies from the circulation so that the clinical status or the symptoms of patients might improve. Efgartigimod is approved for patients with generalized myasthenia gravis that are acetylcholine receptor antibody positive. And efgartigimod is also being investigated in the treatment of patients with severe autoimmune diseases that are mediated by pathogenic or defective IgG autoantibodies. Please note that efgartigimod is not approved for the treatment of ocular MG. This is why we are performing the ocular study to ensure that we have enough high-quality evidence to prove that efgartigimod works for the majority of the overall population with ocular MG compared to the current treatments that patients might be receiving. Next slide, please. Now I will take a moment to define ocular myasthenia gravis. This is basically a quick review for those in the audience that might not be familiar with the definition. And let's break this down a little bit. So ocular usually refers to the eyes. Myasthenia gravis is a rare chronic neuromuscular autoimmune disease. In the body, there is an area where the neurons and the muscles communicate that is called neuromuscular junction. During normal conditions, when the neurons and the muscles communicate properly at the neuromuscular junction, we are happy because our muscles can perform normal functions and activities like walking, running, smiling, etc. However, when the neurons and the muscles do not communicate properly at the neuromuscular junction, and this can because by several reasons, then the activities, the normal activities that require muscular function are defective. In the case of autoimmune myasthenia gravis, the body produces abnormal immune antibodies that target or affect the neuromuscular junction. This results in reduced or disrupted neuromuscular communication or transmission and causes muscle weakness. If the muscle weakness is localized to the eyes, this is what we refer to as ocular myasthenia gravis. If the muscle weakness occurs in different parts of the body, like the arms or the legs, it is called generalized myasthenia gravis. About approximately 50 to 60% of individuals with myasthenia gravis initially experience ocular symptoms before the disease progresses to move to other muscles in the body. Ocular symptoms that are typically experienced with ocular myasthenia gravis include double vision, and the clinical term for this is diplopia, or drooping of the eyelids, which the clinical term for this is ptosis. Also, blurry vision. Some of the available treatment options for ocular MG patients that are listed on the slide are typically used for generalized myasthenia gravis, which is off-label and not approved by the FDA for ocular MG. Those treatment modalities are aimed to improve muscle strength and control. So there remains a high unmet medical need for an approved, safe, and effective immuno treatment for patients with ocular MG. Next slide, please. Now let's start talking about the ADAPT Oculus trial. The primary objective of the ADAPT Oculus study is to evaluate the efficacy and safety of Efgartigimod, which is the active treatment, compared to a placebo, which has no active drug and it's like taking water. Other objectives of the ADAPT Oculus study are to investigate long-term efficacy, safety, and tolerability of Efgartigimod. ADAPT Oculus study is important for several reasons. One reason is that at the moment, we do not have a lot of information from high-quality conducted studies about treatment for ocular myasthenia. We are hoping to particularly fill this gap with this particular trial, or help to fill this gap. In the study, we're trying to evaluate whether Efgartigimod can be appropriate treatment for ocular MG patients. Ultimately, the results of the study might hopefully lead to an approval through the FDA in this subgroup of patients with MG. This evaluation is important for a couple of reasons. First, it ensures that there is a review by a regulatory agency, which is independent from the study, to say that the trial was conducted appropriately. It ensures that the results have been interpreted correctly and can be trusted. Second, this evaluation provides access to patients for the particular treatment. Overall, we are looking to include up to 124 participants from about 26 countries, including about 25 sites within the United States. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about the actual ocular study design. The Oculus trial has a series of inclusion and exclusion criteria to determine who might qualify to participate. The key inclusion and exclusion criteria are listed on this slide. A key factor used when we developed the criteria was to ensure that the patients really have ocular myasthenia and myasthenia gravis, and that the predominant symptoms are ocular in nature, not generalized symptoms. So this is an important uh, aspect of the eligibility criteria, which I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Some of the inclusion criteria include ensuring that the ocular myasthenia gravis must be confirmed through medical records, special questionnaires, and physical exam. Also, one of the criteria is that the current treatment for myasthenia gravis must stay at the same dose for a certain period of time as required by the study protocol. And the other exclusion criteria, you can read them at your leisure. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about the duration of the Oculus MG trial. There's a screening period that is about 5 weeks. This is where we are checking for the eligibility of someone who wants to participate in the study to ensure that they qualify and meet the requirements to enter the study. Some testings are required during the screening period, including electrocardiograms, or which measures the heart rhythm, blood testing, and some other assessments relating this to the severity of the ocular MG disorder. There is also some information that needs to be submitted about how a patient was diagnosed with ocular myasthenia. In some cases, some patients might not have the correct diagnosis of ocular myasthenia gravis or might have generalized symptoms, which is exclusionary for the study. Those patients cannot, again, join the trial. When patients are eligible to enter the study itself will last up to 2 years and 3 months. During this time, patients make regular visits to the trial sites for necessary exams and administration of the investigational drug or placebo, depending on which part of the study the patient might be, which I will explain later. When you also have the right to and choice to withdraw from this experiment at any time and for any reason. So even though that this study lasts for up to 2 years, you do not feel obliged to continue with the trial if you decide not to. Next slide. Before you start the participation in the trial, you will receive an informed consent form where all the details about the study will be described. After understanding the information on the form and ensuring that all your questions are answered, if you decide to participate, you will need to sign the form. This is a required step in order to continue with the process. After signing the informed consent form, you are allowed to start the screening period and the study assessment that I mentioned earlier. Again, screening is to ensure that you qualify and meet the requirements to enter the study. After your eligibility is confirmed and your screening period is completed, you can start the trial. At the beginning of the trial, there is a period called randomization, which is like flipping a coin. During this process, the participant is assigned to receive either Efgartigimod or placebo, which is the inactive treatment. This is a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning that 50% of the participants will receive Efgartigimod and 50% will receive the placebo or the inactive treatment. No one knows which treatment group in the study the participant is in. Not the doctor, not the patient, not the administrator, even argenx. This process is called blinding. Next step, please. The Oculus trial is divided into 2 parts, Part A and Part B. Part A is randomized, as I mentioned before. 50% of the patients receive Efgartigimod, and Part A lasts up to 7 weeks. Part A consists of a 3-week treatment period and 4-week follow-up period. So in total is Part A lasts up to last 7 weeks, as mentioned previously. During the 3 weeks, patients receive 4 doses of efgartigimod or placebo. The placebo part of the entire study is only 3 weeks, which is relatively short compared to other studies for myasthenia gravis. After Part A is complete, participants transfer to Part B. Part B is the open label extension part of the trial, and it lasts up to 2 years. During Part B, all participants will receive efgartigimod. So there's no placebo arm or group in Part B of the trial. Each Part A and Part B, consists of 2 different types of visits. One of the visits are the treatment visits, where participants receive treatment with either efgartigimod or placebo. Then there are follow-up visits where participants will undergo examinations and assessments. Next slide, please. 2 scales are used to assess the effectiveness of efgartigimod. The first scale is the Myasthenia Gravis Impairment Index. This scale measures disease severity based on the signs and symptoms of MG. The second scale is the Myasthenia Gravis Activity of Daily Living. This scale is a questionnaire used to assess the impact of MG on daily functions and activities. Next slide, please. This slide is a summary of Part A and Part B that I described before. But a key point that I want to reiterate and I want you to remember is that the study drug or placebo are given through an injection right under the skin with the pre-filled syringe, and it takes about 30 seconds to perform this injection. Next slide, please. Another critical component of a clinical trial is privacy. Studies participants' name and other identifying information will not be attached to any records or samples released for research purposes. The records and samples will be identified simply by a code. And again, privacy is very important for us and the confidentiality of the patients. So you do not feel that there will be any kind of violation in this respect. Next slide, please. What else might you want to know about the trial? First, the experimental intervention might or might not benefit you. This is important. This is the risk. You might also experience side effects with the investigational drug in this clinical trial. Side effects are known, but there might be some new side effects that we don't know at this point. Most side effects of efgartigimod in previous trials were mild or moderate, lasting briefly, and needed little to no intervention. So far, efgartigimod is relatively safe per our clinical data. Also, another important factor about the ADAPT Oculus trial is that there is no cost to participate in the trial. And there are mechanisms to help cover travel costs and any related expenses. I know that a lot of patients might have to travel long distances to get to clinical trial sites in some cases. The clinical trial itself will reimburse for those expenses. We do not want those elements to be a barrier to participation in the clinical trial. Also, all the treatments and tests that are done in the trial are paid by the study itself. Next slide. This concludes the main point of the presentation. If you are interested in learning more about the study, you can talk to your physician and mention the ADAPT Oculus clinical trial. Here's a website address and email where you can send questions. You can also use your phone to scan the QR code in the right side and to assess if the Adapt Oculus trial might be right for you. I will give you a minute to scan the barcode. Next slide. Thank you for your participation, and we hope that you will consider joining us for this important research to help patients with ocular myasthenia gravis. I will hand it over now to Jenna. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you for that very informative presentation. Thank you for taking the time to walk us through this today. Just checking if we have, it looks like the questions that have been submitted are being answered and have been answered throughout the chat. It looks like there's a couple of questions about the QR code and the website working.
Oh,
So,
should we bring back that slide so that people can?
so I don't know if the QR, it looks like the QR code might not have gone through. Let me try to pull it up one more time. Grab that. So if the QR code is not working, you could also try, what are some other recommendations if the QR code isn't going through?
So maybe send a question through send an email to the clinicaltrials@argenx.com, and then we can assess what the issue might be.
Okay.
Will that work?
Thank you. Yes. So that that email is posted right here if anybody needs to look at that. And there's just a couple questions about things like locations where the study will be held. Is that information available through the email as well?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you once again. Thank you everybody for joining us today. I wish you all the best afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.